This is question number 11. Number 7 of homework 12. A temporary price shock causes energy prices to decrease. So in this case, you're given the setup says the energy prices to decrease. Sometimes the setup may change to energy prices to increase, depending on the different trials. In this case, energy prices happen to decrease. And if energy prices decrease, and we know that energy prices is part of the overall price, so that decrease will decrease the inflation. Hence, the it's like a inflation shock. If you check the book or my lecture slides, you can find in actually in chapter 23, which we talk about AD and AS analysis, where we talk about the components of the factors which can influence the AS curve. So the factors include expected inflation, the output gap, persistent output gap, and this rho, that's the inflation shock. So the setup basically is consistent with this rho here. It's a inflation shock, supply shock. Specifically because inflation will go down, right? Because energy prices to decrease. So this AS curve will shift down. So then we can use that. So so shift down and to the right. So this is my new AS curve because this is AS1, so this has to be AS2. And then you can see that this is the original equilibrium with the inflation and output. And with the shift of the AS curve down, the new equilibrium shift to the right and down. So that means the new inflation will be lower, but output will be higher. So that's our first part, using the line drawing to draw the curve that will shift as a result of this shock. And we have done that. Now let's check our answer. Nice work. And then let's continue. If the government decides to stabilize inflation, because inflation has been decreased, right? If government wants to stabilize inflation, that means inflation, they want to increase the inflation. But remember, the government can only shift the AD curve, right, by either tightening the monetary policy or loosening the monetary policy. So in this case, if they further tightening the monetary policy, that means AD curve will shift to the left. You can see that will further decrease the inflation. So what the government can do is to loosen the monetary policy, which will shift the AD curve to the right. So that can bring back, and let me just draw this, and then later I have to erase that, otherwise this is kind of anyway. So it seems that it doesn't allow me to draw this. I just want to show you that the AD curve will have to be shifted to the right in order to increase the inflation, right? How could the government shift the AD curve right? By loosening the monetary policy. Then it will have to government expenditure. So it can change government expenditure. Right? We learned that's part of the AD, aggregated demand. If you check the slides, the AD has basically 4 components: consumption, investment, government expenditure, and net exports. So if the government increases this government expenditure, then this AD curve will shift up and shift to the right, not shift up, shift to the right. So it has to increase the government expenditure, make the AD curve shift to the right. So now let's check our answer. We're done. And this will cause which curve to shift? As we just explained, this will cause the AD curve shift. Excellent. And inflation will stabilize and output would. So then the inflation will stabilize, but the price is rather than bringing down the output gap, because the initial new equilibrium is here, so the output is greater than the potential output. In order to stabilize the inflation, you can see that even though the inflation is brought back to its original level, but the output is further away from its original level, the potential output. So output would increase further. So that's when we talk about this chapter, chapter 23 and chapter 24, that for the temporary AS curve or AS shock, aggregate supply shock, the government faces a trade-off, right? They can either stabilize the inflation or they can stabilize the output, but not both. And this is the example showing you why that's the case. So you can see that the government can also stabilize the output. And how can the government do that? Then they have to tighten the monetary policy, and they have to probably decrease the government expenditure, which will bring the AD curve, shift the AD curve to the left. Then you can see that the output will be lowered, but the price is that inflation will be further away from its original level. So that's why we have this trade-off.